Now, if you're familiar with the Mastering Diabetes method, you'll know that all oils are listed in the red light category, meaning that we suggest that you minimize or preferably completely eliminate all oils from your diet in order to maximize your insulin sensitivity. Okay, you can click anywhere on the screen to review our traffic light guidelines, which will give you insight into the exact foods that we classify as green light, yellow light, and red light. However, let's understand that not all oils are created equal. First, let's address some types of oils that are generally accepted as quote unquote unhealthy oils. There's two families of oils that are generally accepted as unhealthy, which include number one, oils that have a high concentration of omega-6 fatty acids, and number two, all hydrogenated oils. Oils with a high concentration of omega-6 fatty acids include soybean oil, corn oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, and rice bran oil. The key problem with omega-6 fatty acids isn't the fact that they're unhealthy in and of themselves. In fact, omega-6 is a valuable fatty acid that plays a role in promoting inflammation in response to injury. So while omega-6 fatty acids are not harmful per se, it's the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids that is a very important aspect of your overall metabolic health. Now, the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is a marker of inflammation. The ideal 6-to-3 ratio is between 3-to-1 and 5-to-1. However, the more refined your diet is, and the higher your intake of omega-6 oils, that dramatically increases your 6-to-3 ratio north of 10-to-1, 20-to-1, and sometimes as high as 30-to-1 or even 50-to-1. A more specific ratio is actually what's called the AA to EPA ratio, which stands for the arachidonic acid to eicosapentaenoic acid ratio. Don't worry, this is not going to be on the test, okay? These are important fatty acids because these are two other compounds that are known as eicosanoids and prostaglandins, and those compounds can be made from arachidonic acid and eicosapentaenoic acid. Now, I know this is beginning to sound like biology class, and I don't want to bore you with all the annoying details. Eicosanoids and prostaglandins play diverse roles in your blood, especially in the inflammatory process, in fever promotion, in blood pressure regulation, and in blood clotting. Now, AA and EPA are very potent substances that have an ability to promote or decrease inflammation. In the same way that a lower omega-6 to omega-3 ratio is a marker of optimal health and generally considered a good strategy, the same goes true for the AA to EPA ratio. The lower that ratio, the better. Hydrogenated oils are the second type of oil that we should definitely avoid completely. Hydrogenation is a chemical process that was designed specifically to prolong the shelf life of liquid oils by turning them into solids at room temperature. By hydrogenating liquid oils, food manufacturers can prolong their shelf life and increase the amount of time they sit on a shelf, thereby increasing the probability that it will be sold and generate revenue. This hydrogenation process turns naturally occurring liquid fat into other solidified forms. And the process of doing that creates saturated fats as well as trans fats. And since the research is clear on the negative effects of trans fats, including but not limited to an increased risk of cardiovascular disease, an increased risk of atherosclerosis, increased LDL cholesterol, as well as saturated fat, which can increase your risk for many cardiovascular disturbances, we believe that it's better to avoid hydrogenated oils altogether. The less of those foods in your diet, the better. Get them out as soon as possible. Now, you'll notice that olive oil isn't on either of these no-go lists, which is true. And in fact, olive oil has been shown to have some very beneficial effects, which is why this topic can be incredibly confusing. Now, we're going to break down some of the most recent research here. This high-quality meta-analysis reports on the impact of olive oil and cancer risk. 48 studies were included in this analysis, which found that the highest quantity of olive oil intake was associated with a 31% lower likelihood of cancer, including breast cancer, gastrointestinal cancer, upper aerodigestive cancer, and urinary tract cancers. The key mechanism proposed here for its beneficial effect were the antioxidant properties of polyphenols, which naturally reduce oxidative stress and reduce the risk of developing cancer. Now, after all, olives themselves are packed with polyphenols, vitamins, and other vital nutrients that have been shown to improve your overall health. And some of these key compounds do remain present in the final oil when it becomes a liquid. However, what's missing from this data is the fact that there aren't many details for the overall quality of the diet. There were quite a few Mediterranean populations included in this analysis, but these benefits were displayed in non-Mediterranean populations as well, showing that the olive oil potentially does have some cancer prevention benefits on its own. Now, this is a compelling feather in the cap of olive oil. Now, perhaps even more compelling was a study of over 90,000 participants in the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study in the United States, which investigated the impact of olive oil consumption on the risk of all-cause and cause-specific mortality. Over the course of 28 years, participants who reported the highest olive oil consumption, which is greater than 0.5 tablespoons per day or greater than 7 grams per day, had a 19% lower risk of all-cause mortality, which is a good thing, a 19% lower risk of cardiovascular disease mortality, which is a great thing, a 17% lower risk of cancer mortality, a 29% lower risk of neurodegenerative disease mortality, and an 18% lower risk of respiratory disease mortality. All of these are fantastic outcomes. And that was in comparison with those who rarely or never consumed olive oil. Now, this correlation even persisted after adjusting to other dietary factors, and data showed that as little as 1.5 grams a day of olive oil was associated with a benefit in reducing overall mortality. Now, what's important to note here is, once again, our key question: consuming olive oil instead of what? In this study, olive oil was used as a replacement for margarine, for butter and mayonnaise, and for dairy fat, and it was associated with the lowest mortality risk of all of those choices. What's interesting is that substituting olive oil for other vegetables, including canola oil, corn oil, safflower oil, and sunbean oil, did not result in reduced mortality risk, suggesting that vegetable oils in general may themselves confer reduced mortality. So one key takeaway from this study could be something that we probably already knew, that plant-derived oils may be healthier than saturated fatty acid-rich foods that come primarily from the animal-based world. And on a large scale, individuals who choose olive oil certainly did experience a reduced mortality rate, which shows that olive oil may in fact be a healthful choice and does have a place in a health-promoting diet. However, one key question that this leaves us with is olive oil gonna give you something that a plant-based whole food diet doesn't give? Now, the Mediterranean diet is one of the most popular subjects of study when it comes to exploring diets that integrate whole food, primarily plant-based nutrition, with the addition of small amounts of fish and oil and other foods that might traditionally be avoided in low-fat plant-based diets. And with good reason. Compared to the vast majority of global diets, the Mediterranean diet has been associated with improved cardiovascular health, with improved quality of life, with longevity, and with a reduced chronic disease risk and mortality risk. Now, add in the fact that the Mediterranean diet prominently features olive oil, and you have a compelling suggestion that olive oil can be part of a healthy overall diet. However, many researchers have begun to explore the various components of the Mediterranean diet to try and tease out which specific foods may be having specific effects. And it's hard to discern whether all of these featured staples that are present within the Mediterranean diet are healthy choices, or if some of them are technically covering up for some of the others. Or maybe the Mediterranean diet is simply just an overall healthy collection of foods that tend to be healthier than other collections of foods that may come from the standard American diet, as an example. Now, the research team in this article sought to understand the effect of meals rich in olive oil compared to an alternative, which is canola oil, and how they affected overall endothelial function in the post-meal state. And while the study was small in scale, the results were clear. The meal that was enriched in olive oil inhibited endothelial function far more than the meal that was rich in canola oil, with all other aspects of the diet being equal. Now, it's worth remembering here that we mentioned something above, which is that most foods are very complex. And for some foods, there can be a mixture of beneficial and negative effects at the same time. So it's entirely possible that olive oil both has the ability to reduce cancer and mortality risk, and the ability to hamper endothelial function simultaneously. In other words, it's doing some beneficial physiological effects, and it also has some negative physiological effects simultaneously. However, the near ubiquity of olive oil in the Mediterranean diet also supports another potential conclusion of this study, which is that it's entirely possible that the whole foods and plants present in the Mediterranean diet provide an overall healthful effect, and that one reduces their cancer risk, their mortality risk, and their risk for many chronic diseases, despite the presence of olive oil rather than because of the presence of olive oil. Now, we believe that as more data comes out, specifically isolating the effects of olive oil as an isolated food, we will start to get a much cleaner picture of the effects of this one compound rather than having it be present inside of a large collection of foods that adds many confounding variables. This video was just a snippet of a much more in-depth discussion. Click on the link on the screen to check out the full-length episode. Now, the science behind health is overly complicated, unfortunately, but getting healthy doesn't have to be. Visit masteringdiabetes.org/start. Answer some questions about yourself and schedule a free consultation to talk with somebody on our team who's going to show you exactly how we've transformed the lives of thousands of people using the Mastering Diabetes method. We have a limited number of spots available, and that's why it's imperative to find a good fit. Again, visit masteringdiabetes.org/start to schedule a free zero commitment discovery call and start taking control of your health today.